It was a cold afternoon on May 3rd, 1999 in Garkon village in Ladakh's Batalik sector when 37-year-old Tashi Namgyal, out looking for his missing yak, saw something suspicious. Camouflaged Pakistani soldiers building bunkers in his village. Without further ado, Tashi Namgyal rushed to a nearby Indian Army post to tell them what he saw. By this time, Indian Army headquarters in Delhi had also started receiving reports of unusual activity in the Kargil and Batalik sectors of Jammu and Kashmir. Then Army Chief General V.P. Malik was on a visit to Poland. Upon receiving these intelligence reports, he asked his staff in India to step up patrolling operations. By the time he returned home, it had become evident that the intrusion was much bigger and occupied a much larger swathe than the usual cross-border terrorist activities carried out by Pakistani Mujahideen. For a start, these men were much more disciplined and much better trained than Mujahideen usually are at occupying territory and keeping it. The intensity of their mortar and artillery fire gave the game away. The Pakistan Army's signature was all over the invasion at Kargil. Much later, the Indian Army would discover that the Pakistani soldiers, clad in civilian clothes, actually belonged to its Northern Light Infantry Battalion. On May 24th, General V.P. Malik briefed the Cabinet Committee of Security Affairs. By May 26th, India had launched Operation Vijay to flush out the foreign infiltrators. India was at war with Pakistan. Military and diplomatic jargon, however, would ensure that the invasion at Kargil would never be called a war, but simply a limited conflict. So how did the Pakistan Army manage to pull off such a large operation? And how did the plethora of Indian agencies explain this massive intelligence failure?
When there are two heads of states, Prime Ministers of Pakistan and Prime Minister of India, they are talking to each other and they are signing an agreement. I think that has to be taken very, very seriously. The problem was in Pakistan. The Pakistan Army did not take their own Prime Minister into confidence, and that is how then we were surprised when the action took place. But I don't think that we misunderstood Pakistan.
I mean, to be honest, we didn't know exactly what was happening. All we had said was that something unusual is going on there and we need to take note of it. And it's one of those things, it's one of those areas that I was asked this question by that how come we ignored this? And my answer then and my answer today would be the same, that, if the Pakistanis were to come across, that was an area we least expected them to come from, because it is the most difficult way of coming into Kashmir. But it happened, and frankly, everybody was taken unawares.
Certainly, the Pakistani soldiers had used some smart deception techniques to outwit the Indian Army. Apart from dressing in shalwar kameez, all communication was carried out in the languages of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, so as to prevent Kashmiris and Ladakhis from understanding what they were saying. Only 4 army officers, including Musharraf, knew about this plan, Operation Koh-e-Paima, as it was called, to invade Jammu and Kashmir. Operation Koh-e-Paima intended to use the peak winter months to occupy the Kargil, Dras and Batalik sectors. The Pakistanis knew the Indian Army would pull back, as they did every winter, leaving vast swathes of territory unprotected. The Pakistani generals believed the surprise invasion would allow their soldiers to capture India's National Highway 1A, the only link between India and Ladakh, thereby cutting it off from the rest of the country. Pakistan's Northern Light Infantry, a regiment based in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir with deep knowledge of the area's mountainous terrain, was given the charge to lead the operation. The big question, meanwhile, was whether Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, still glowing from his political success in getting Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee to come to Lahore on his peace bus only 3 months before, in February 1999, was aware of the Musharraf plan or not.
Kargil intrusion did catch us by surprise for the simple reason that Nawaz Sharif was oozing goodwill, but we had our suspicions because of this sort of rhetoric, but we didn't, as far as I was aware, anticipate it would be such a major intrusion across the line of control. Initially, the Pakistanis took the position with the international community that they had not crossed the line of control. It was not clear where it was, which hilltop it lay on. To which we provided them with the maps when signed by the two senior army officials in 1972 of India and Pakistan, which spelled out precisely where the line of control lay. So there was that whole argument which they said that it was not very clear, it could have been one hilltop or another. We just demolished it. And in fact, I discussed it with Brajesh Mishra, and it was provided to every major power. And very frankly, I took the view that we should, play it cool, tell the whole world, but with the confidence to the world that we're going to prevail. In the meantime, PM had called a meeting where I was called in, which he was briefed by the service chiefs. And General Malik made it very clear to him that he would require time, he would not give a timeline, but his boys would ensure that we threw out the Pakistanis from wherever they were positioned on our side of the line of control.
Over 6 weeks in late May, June and early July 1999, Indian soldiers fought back to defeat the Pakistani army on the heights of Kargil. The official death toll of soldiers and officers who laid down their lives in defense of the motherland was 553. Private TV stations brought the war into the living rooms of the entire country, making it the first media war ever to be fought in the Indian subcontinent. On May 31, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, a master of understatement, declared that a war-like situation had developed in Kargil. Over the next 10 days, the situation deteriorated rapidly. On June 10th, Pakistan returned the mutilated bodies of 6 soldiers, enraging India. Delhi demanded that Pakistan follow the norms of civilized nations, as well as the Vienna and Geneva Conventions guaranteeing respect for the dead, especially in war and warlike situations. By the middle of June, as tensions between the two nuclear neighbors escalated, it was inevitable that the US, the world's biggest power at the time, would get involved. Vajpayee, under pressure from his own army to enlarge the perimeter of the conflict and inflict pain upon Pakistan, held his nerve. He realized that at all times, India had to appear to be the responsible nation which responsibly commanded a nuclear arsenal, while Pakistan's generals needed to be exposed for their irresponsible behavior.
Government as well as the armed forces were very quick to respond, and I think there was a very coherent and a very well calculated diplomatic as well as military and political response, which I think shifted the advantage of the initial advantage which Pakistan had and moved it in the direction, I think, of India. We were able to, at very, very high cost, particularly in terms of the loss of our soldiers, it actually perhaps almost defined, it brought about a new definition of heroism actually. Kargil from that point of view was a very costly war in terms of human lives, but it also showed the extent to which the Indian soldier, the Indian state was willing to undertake sacrifice for the cause of our national defense. And the decision taken also not to cross the line of control contributed towards this high cost, But I think ultimately it was politically at that time the right decision, and it helped to raise the stature of India as well as give it a diplomatic advantage, which I think we were able to use eventually with countries, including with major countries like the United States and China.
A strategic decision was taken by Indian think tank during the Kargil crisis that they were not going to, in fact there were several elements to it, but key elements are: one, that they were not going to accept ceasefire and negotiations unless the Pakistanis had cleared out of what they had occupied. Because that was Pakistan's strategy, that get to a ceasefire and then keep negotiating forever, then what you've taken is yours. But the decision was that no matter what the costs, even if they were initial setbacks, India will fight on until the Pakistanis cleared out. The second was that under no circumstances will this be escalated beyond the line of control in Kashmir, and essentially in the same Kargil Dras region where incursions had taken place. So even across the LOC in other areas from the Indian side there was no escalation. Third, that even to carry out the operations to evict the Pakistanis in Kargil Dras region, Kargil Dras Batalik region, India will not cross the LOC and go on the other side. Now that was a very clever, strategic and I would say political decision, because this repeated harping on the LOC was also aimed at, and it is not something that happens coincidentally, that was the plan. It was aimed at establishing the legitimacy of the LOC as the de facto border.
By the middle of June 1999, as Indian soldiers clawed back, inch by inch, Indian territory that had been lost in a surprise invasion, Vajpayee called upon US President Bill Clinton and the rest of the international community to put the finger of blame on Pakistan. If Pakistan didn't order its soldiers to walk back across the line of control, Vajpayee said, India would have to pursue its own course of action. A few days later, US President Clinton told Nawaz Sharif to order the Pakistan army to withdraw from Kargil and go back across the line of control. By June 29th, the Indian Army had recaptured two important posts near Tiger Hill, a hugely important feature that dominated the landscape. By July 4th, it had captured Tiger Hill. This was seen as a de facto victory for India.
I recall on Independence, US Independence Day, when Nawaz took off from America, Asma Jahangir, their loquacious UN ambassador, asked me, she was then the newspaper editor, as how I saw the visit. I told her, Asma, this is the beginning of the end game of your Kargil misadventure. And she printed that the next morning in the news as end of end game, says Indian envoy.
10 days later, India declared Operation Vijay to be a success. By July 26, 1999, every Pakistani soldier had been evicted from Indian territory. The conflict between the two nuclear neighbors had finally come to an end.